attack. I wanna equip you and use against my enemies, yeah. You see, you wanted to save you and then learn how to raise you, but I forget you from the wilderness.
Werewolves are humanoid dogs, and I have a massive hog. That's about all I have for today.
That's your one today. Okay, I think that the second verse goes, when I scream at the room, I show you my red rocket. Play your cards right, I let you put it in your pocket. Yeah.
You've got a detachable penis, do you?
No, it's singing from the point of view of the wolf. I mean, mine is very much attached, and I would be quite upset if anybody did detach it on me.
So it's like the Metallica song of Wolf and Man.
Back to the dawning of life. Dun, 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 dun,
Shit.
I love that James Hetfield. Hiding afraid.
What is that?
Oh, you don't even have to say anything. Like
I
you just make a James Hetfield sound.
I think I messaged you one time how every James Hetfield lyric is either about driving alcohol or like being like a hunter, or all of those things mashed together. It's like
combined.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have the Possession song, Until It Sleeps.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you have that too. But what's up, everyone? This is Rob here, and with me is
Eamon.
And together we are Monster Fuzz Podcast, motherfucker.
Together we're Lars and James.
And yeah, guys, you know the drill. Everywhere at Monster Fuzz Podcast. Please leave us ratings, reviews. We appreciate all that. We appreciate your feedback. We appreciate emails. Do let us know any supernatural mental shit that you've had happen to you. And do engage with us. We are always here to lend our ear. And yeah,
and most of all, we appreciate you, listener.
Yes.
We appreciate you.
Yes, we're very positive today. Actually, it's a good positive note.
It's sleep deprivation.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah. So to get into it a little bit, we're going to get straight into this biatch. Today we were talking about the first.
Straight in, no kissing.
Yeah, the first werewolves, and we've all heard of werewolves. They've featured on the silver screen fairly heavily over the years. You know, they've been in Twilight, Van Helsing, Underworld, American Werewolf in London. They have been in video games such as Skyrim. They were featured very heavily. Is there any other games you can think of, Eamon, that have werewolves in it?
I think that there is a new game that's just been announced. Called, I think it's just called Werewolf.
Okay.
But I don't know much about it. I think it's an RPG type thing. So I don't know, did you ever play that game Vampire that came out a couple of years ago?
No.
So it's set in like, I think it's the 1800s in London. It's pretty good actually. I've been playing it recently. But yeah, new game coming out called Werewolf. I think it's called Werewolf, but it looks decent.
Right, so yeah, check that out as well. So, you know, we all know werewolves is basically what I'm trying to say. But what I didn't realise when I first started to research this episode was that werewolves were actually treated as a real thing. So what I mean by that is people were tried and killed for allegedly being shapeshifters that changed form into a wolf during the 15th and 1600s. Scary stuff. So yeah, I always considered werewolves as like purely fantasy and mainly, you know, the conjuring of like Hollywood and maybe pre-Hollywood by a little bit, but I didn't actually realize that they went back as far as they do. How about you?
Yeah, I guess a similar stuff. Like for me, I always would have thought that the werewolf was kind of a sort of a sister story to Jekyll and Hyde and stuff like that. So it was sort of showing you the part of you that was, you know, that didn't have any conscience, and it was just animalistic, and it was aggressive and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't realize, same as yourself. Well, I suppose I would have covered something like this before a while ago, and I probably looked into some of the kind of the real life werewolves, if you like. But yeah, it's definitely, I certainly didn't know anything about it until I researched it a while ago, you know.
Right. So yeah, in this episode we explore the origins and the mythology of the werewolf, along with the first real life werewolf trials. So just a quick little preface that we will definitely cover werewolves again. This is just we're sort of condensing a lot of the information here into a few little instances, which sort of make for an interesting episode, but there's a lot more. So do you want to tell people what exactly a werewolf is?
So the image of a werewolf varies wildly depending on the source you see, but in general, the consensus is that a human can turn into a wolf during the nighttime, or more commonly during a full moon. The change can be temporary or permanent. It can be the man himself metamorphosed.
Yeah, I believe that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, we got it in the end. And this is one I actually didn't know, or a double that he sends out.
Yeah, that's like a lapdog.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's almost like a not a necromancer, but some sort of beast mage or something like that, right? It can also simply just be a messenger of the human being.
Right, so just a dog.
Werewolves were said, yeah. There you go, Fubu. Werewolves were said in European folklore to bear telltale physical traits, even in their human form. So it included the meeting of both eyebrows at the bridge of the nose. So a lot of unibrowed fuckers were eyed with suspicion back in those days. Curved fingernails, low set ears, and a swinging stride. So I like what you put here is think of one of the Gallagher brothers out of Oasis.
Pretty
That's
much.
Probably two.
If you want to think of
they howl anyway. I'll give them that.
They do howl. They can't really sing very well. They have a swinging stride, and their eyebrows meet at the bridge of the nose. So it is actually possible that Liam and Noel Gallagher are shape-shifting werewolves.
Yeah, like a champagne supernova.
Shiitza.
I don't even know. That didn't sound. Shiitza. Me brother's a bastard. One method of identifying a werewolf in its human form was to cut the flesh of the accused under the pretense that fur would be seen within the wound. I hadn't heard that before. That's very interesting. And a Russian superstition recalls a werewolf can be recognized by bristles under the tongue. And I let you read out the next part.
I was trying to sabotage it. So with the bristles under the tongue, maybe early pioneers of cunnilingus, pubes would be hard to get out of your teeth before having an Oral-B and a dose of floss. So is that worth thinking about, Eamon?
Yeah, no, it could be that these unibrowed, low-set ear swing and slide Lotharios that were going around just eating young ones out of it.
What if you had a dose of minge and you were just walking down the street and some lad's like, show me your teeth, show me your fucking teeth, and then you're like, oh,
you'd be like,
shit.
this is the worst possible time, fuck's sake.
Yeah,
I'm literally just and you can't say it because she's like the mayor's like daughter or wife or something like that, and you're like, and they're like, are you eating the box off of the mayor's wife? You're like, no man, I'm a werewolf.
Have you been eating the minge? And then they'll hit you with a truncheon. Oh, you little shit. To start whacking you with a truncheon and for being a werewolf. But so that's the werewolves.
You know not to put your mouth near the genitals. You know not to put your mouth. It's wrong, and we don't do it in this town. All right.
Literally, though, yeah. Let's not forget about the lichens. So again, if anyone's familiar with werewolves and the mythology of werewolves, and have watched or consumed any of that type of related media, they've probably heard of lichens. So if you are familiar with any werewolf mythology, then you've probably heard of lichens. In a werewolf, the transformation to wolf takes place on a full moon day, and they cannot restrict the transformation. In a lichen, the transformation to a wolf can take place at any time and whenever they really like. Persons are transformed into werewolves and lichens when another werewolf or lichen bites them. So much like a vampire type of scenario there where one bites one, turns it into the other. Werewolves, which have their origin in English folklore, are human beings that have been changed into humanoid wolves, whereas lichens are humanoid wolves. So that's kind of confusing, but I think what they're trying to get at is like a lichen is more wolf than human, and a werewolf is more human than wolf, right?
Yeah, so it seems like a lichen is almost a different breed altogether. You know what I mean? Like it's it's an animal first and it has traits of a human, whereas the werewolf is a human first that transforms into the animal and sort of switches and goes back. So one's more man, one's more animal, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got a little brief history here. Do you want to talk about some of the earlier times of like werewolf mythology?
Yep. So this is by no means a comprehensive rundown of all the things wolf-liken, as most cultures have their own versions, and we'll likely return to our dog brethren in the future episodes. And actually, speaking of dog brethren, I'm sure we probably will touch on it a little bit in this, but dog men are sort of the other offshot of werewolves as well, you know, which is they're an interesting thing unto themselves.
Yeah, dog men are like another separate thing, right?
Yeah, dogmen are. And actually, tell the listeners there about when you were just checking out some different Facebook pages of for inspiration for the crypto stuff. I'd like you to tell the listeners about one of the quotes or one of the comments that was left by somebody.
You'd probably remember that one better than me, but it was
it tickled me pink.
It was some guy who was like extremely serious, and it was like the dogmen. What was the story again?
I think dogmen are hanging around my property, scaring my son. So I've gotten a shotgun to shoot the dogmen. And I think it was like, what's the best bullets to use against the dogmen? Something like that. It was great. I loved it. Yeah, I'd love to get him on the show.
Yeah. We can't remember your name. Actually, we probably do have that somewhere. So let's try and reach out to him and get him.
If you're listening to this now and you're going, Jesus, that actually sounds like me. I was looking for some ammunition there to shoot a dog man who was terrorizing my family, and now these two knuckleheads from Ireland are jeering me online. Please do get in touch with us at Monster Fuzz Podcast and just elaborate on it. Where did the dog man come from? What kind of a dog is he? Is he an Alsatian? Is he sort of like more of a lap dog, a Shih Tzu kind of a thing?
That'd be really
is it a sort of a really cute man?
Yeah, because imagine you were a dog man, but you're a
dog man. Yeah, I was gonna say, what if you weren't actually like, because you have a man, but you're only like 2 feet tall, and you just have these shrill little barks nipping at people's ankles and stuff.
That'd be really disappointing.
It's all possible.
That'd be really disappointing. Yeah. But yeah, like if you're listening and you're like, oh yeah, dogmen, yeah, I seen them yesterday. Yeah, do call in and don't hesitate for sure. But do you want to go into their roles or the concept of the werewolf then a little bit?
Yeah, so the concept of the werewolf in Western and Northern Europe is strongly influenced by the role of the wolf in Germanic paganism. So if we refer to famous Anglo-Saxon epos, Beowulf, different etymologies have been suggested, but it seems certain that the wolf does mean wolf. One interpretation of Beowulf is Podolfer, which is like Thor wolf.
I like the little inflection you put on that there. I felt like I was in a different country.
I did my best. To be honest, man, when you're with me, I take you to a different dimension. You know, when you're around me, you just...
That's true.
So it's such a breath of fresh air.
I wouldn't go that far, but it's a breath
oh
of
my God,
something.
when you're with me, women want to be me when men want to be with me. No, wait, it's the other way. The other one. The other way around. But probably also the same way. No, that's not true. When you're around me, you probably want to get out as soon as you can. But perhaps the wolf of the Germanic god Thor or Beo, or perhaps as Beadolf, i.e. battle or war wolf, similar to Icelandic Bodulf, which is a war wolf.
Badulfur.
Badulfur.
So
in his book Man into Wolf, Robert Eisler.
If I could just interject
sorry,
briefly.
Never.
It's the fucking delay on stupid Zoom, man. It's like, we're trying to get the flow, but the idea with that, it seems to be like very early on, wolf was like sort of a symbol. Like the word wolf meant, you were like a wolf basically. So do you want to go on about Robert Eisler?
Yeah, so in his book Man into Wolf, Robert Eisler tried to cast the Indo-European tribal names, meaning wolf or wolfmen, in terms of the European transition from fruit gathering to predatory hunting. which kind of is interesting. That sort of makes sense.
It's yeah, I think it was probably a way to like G up the men when they had to turn to hunting. Was like, right guys, we're like, you know, you're wolf, you've now become the wolf man, like the Metallica song again. I wonder, did James Hetfield read that book? It's a very, very possible.
I'd say James Hetfield probably reads a lot of books about monsters and demons.
I'd say it does, you know.
I'd say he probably does.
But the interesting thing about that is, like, I wonder at what time did humans decide like foraging just wasn't going to cut it, like, or was it a thing where, you know, like, I wonder when the switch to meat was made, like, or was it a very gradual thing? You know, it's hard to know that. There's definitely answers for that, I'm sure, like, online. But yeah, it's an interesting thing.
It's interesting. They say when we started to cook meat was where our intelligence came from. There's one theory that when we began to eat meat, that sort of led to the development of our frontal cortex, I suppose, and the way that we became more logical and rational and sort of found more reason or whatever. Which again, look, it's a theory. There's also a stoned ape theory about us eating mushrooms and that giving us an intelligence. And there's another one. Have you ever heard the aquatic ape theory?
Yeah. I have heard that one. That one's like fairly widely disproven now. But the
yes,
yeah, I read up on it and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I was like, oh no, wait, all this is disproven. But yeah. So there was also early Christian authors that mentioned werewolves. In the City of God, Augustine of Hippo gives an account. He explains that it is very generally believed that by certain witches' spells, men may be turned into wolves. Physical metamorphosis was also mentioned in the Capitulatum Episcopi, attributed to the Council of Ankara in the 4th century, which became the church's doctrinal text in relation to magic, witches, and transformations such as those of werewolves. The Capitulatum Episcopi states that whoever believes that anything can be transformed into another species or likeness except by God himself is beyond doubt an infidel. So it's interesting. That part was interesting because, like, it means that people were actively believing in other things and they had to put out this sort of doctrine that, you know, you can't believe in this shit, like, do you know?
Well, even like if you think of, you know, Christianity, one of the 10 commandments is don't worship false idols. You know what I mean? And so, like, yeah, I think there's always been a danger because there's actually quite a lot of competition in the religious ideology world.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it seems like you would have to keep stamping out stuff like that. And then when you have critical thought and someone says, well, how do we know that like our God is the right one and the lads who are worshipping Allah aren't right? You know, and you're generally told to cop yourself on and probably would be put to death maybe many, many moons ago. So yeah, it's interesting they try to monopolize that sense of identity and belief and creationism.
Religion, man, back then would have been absolutely wild. Like, can you imagine, like, you just roll up into this village and everyone in the village believes in a wolf, and they also all think that they can turn into wolves at night. And like you're talking about the 10 commandments, like, try and fucking give me the 10 commandments when I believe in turning into a wolf, bitch. Especially if I'm actually turning into a wolf. Try and fucking put that thou shalt respect your neighbor bullshit on me and I'll eat your ass. Like, don't, like,
I'd be sticking with wolves.
Yeah, like, I mean, so that's but isn't that crazy? It actually, in a way, look, I'm not anti-religion, so let's just get that on record, but it kind of makes religion sound funny that it had to compete with wolf people. It's like an act of concern, you know.
And all you really have to do is make your religion sound cooler. Like, oh, there's a guy in the sky, and you know he made you, and he needs you to believe in him, but he won't give you any evidence that he ever existed. But if you don't believe in him, you'll go to hell. You're like, that sounds silly. Why would he do that? He sounds like no, he wants to know that you believe in him. And he also tried to get one of his guys to kill his son for him, to show him how much he loved him. and then said, no, I know you don't really have to do it when he was sure he was going to do it. Like, it sort of makes God sound like some sort of fucking maniacal ex-girlfriend or something, you know?
Yeah, he was
Like,
an interesting dude.
Kind of crazy.
What is your, like, I suppose we're getting a little bit off topic, but let's indulge it. What is your religion, sort of, what way would you describe your, like, do you have any sort of beliefs in anything?
No, I wouldn't say that I was anything, if that makes sense. I wouldn't, like,
are you spiritual?
Define myself by anything. Yeah, I would be spiritual, and not that I necessarily believe strongly in anything, but I open myself to the possibility of lots of things, and I would certainly be open to the idea of I don't know how you'd explain it, maybe different things that exist outside of what we can see or sense. You know, I don't live my life by it, but I have found, for me at least, I found a lot of peace from reading some Zen books and mindfulness stuff, which I suppose have their roots in Buddhism. But let's just say I'm not setting up a sex cult. It's like, but I love that as well. Like with these cults, you know, a cult starts and everyone's like, oh yeah, we'll join this thing and it's all about free love and blah blah blah. And then at the end of it, the guy in charge is like, but I am going to have to sleep with everyone's wife, I'm afraid. You know, it's just like, that's always the common denominator.
Never underestimate the power of the ride. Like, if you're after the ride, don't be under any illusions. Like, don't be under any illusions. Most people that are famous wanted to be famous for the ride. So, like, let's not. Yeah. Like, it's a motivator for a lot of people. So yeah,
Absolutely. Don't. What about you? Do you have any religious views or anything you turn to?
No, I think, like, I'm definitely, like, I would class myself as agnostic. Like, the irony of us, like, sort of chortling at God while talking about werewolves and fucking chupacabras and shit is kind of funny. But, like, no, I am agnostic with probably leanings towards the spiritual side, I suppose you could say. Like, which is kind of a little bit of an oxymoron, but it like, I don't know. I'd like to believe that there's more out there, you know? Like, I would. And I like to believe in the alien shit, man. That's what I want to believe in. I want to get into that. I could talk about fucking, we have alien DNA and shit. That's what I want to get into. Let's believe in that type of stuff. But I love space. I love all that stuff. I'm into all that. I'd love to know how that all happened, but chances are we'll never have the answers regardless, even if we, you know, we know what the Big Bang is, but what is the Big Bang? You know, that's the...
Well, this is it. And even if the Big Bang is real, it had to happen in a different dimension, right? Which means that there's loads of dimensions or something. And even, like, when you think about that theoretical physics, they start talking about, like, there was an article I was too dumb to understand it, to be honest, but they were basically saying that they found proof of multiple dimensions or multiple realities because there was some sort of pocket in Antarctica where they were doing some sort of maths stuff, and they saw that gravity was moving the opposite way, or time was moving the opposite way or something, based on what they were doing. So again, I don't understand it. I wouldn't even try to explain it here, but if you look up Antarctica multiple universes, I'm sure you'll find what it was, you know.
Space is
so I mean, when you think about it, space that's like the Kanye West way. So Kanye, what do you believe in terms of, you know, your view on life? And the space is dope.
Yeah, space is dope, and that's really about it. But I used to, when I was consuming mad amounts of hash back in the day, I used to just be like, I used to be astral. I used to be like reading fucking Arthur C. Clarke shit and fucking watching space documentaries all day, and yeah, I used to really enjoy all that, man. I kind of sort of fallen out of interest with it, but I was definitely big into 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think is fantastic. I actually really like Arthur C. Clarke's sort of theory with 2001: A Space Odyssey in general. I think that's a really cool theory. That, like, you know, the aliens sort of laid out these biological waypoints for us, that once we were able to reach these markers, we were basically ascending to become a higher species, you know.
And that's kind of like the monolith. It's
Yeah,
where
which
that comes
the film,
with
the film
the
does
monkeys
a
at the start
terrible
of it.
job
Yeah.
of explaining it, really. Like, sort of,
Right,
yeah,
right.
the first monolith sort of makes them smart, I suppose you could say. The next monolith on the moon is sort of like, oh, okay, guys, you've figured out space travel. Now you need to go to Europa, and they go there, and or not even Europa, but they find the next checkpoint. Basically, the monoliths are like checkpoints, and they're leading them to become a higher race of like what is Star Child at the end, I think. Now I'm butchering the explanation, but Star Child, again, I was consuming mad amounts of hash when I was into all that stuff, so I was yeah, no, Star Child is like the end goal for humans, I suppose you could say. But it's all cool shit, so if you've never checked out 2001, do check that out. But we digress as usual. In these words, in these works of Roman writers, werewolves often received the name versipellis, turnskins, as
I like that.
as opposed to Eamon, who's just a foreskin. Augustine instead uses the phrase in lupum fuisse mutetum, changed into the form of a wolf, to describe the physical metamorphosis of werewolves, which is similar to phrases used in the medieval period. So again, we have more people that are like literally addressing this as a real thing, right?
Yeah. Certainly the further goes on. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention there because I was actually looking for ways that I could jeer you back, but nothing was really coming up. The only one I could get is the medieval period, not to be confused with when Rob gets his period, but it's not great, you know.
Got him.
You know,
Yeah, no.
not a good one.
No, and
Get him.
it's sexist, but I expect nothing less from you now, to be honest with you.
Look, I had very little to work with there. Turnskin, not to be confused with David, who's a foreskin. It was good, and that's what hurts the most.
Do you want to tell us about werewolves in the Middle Ages?
No, I'm sour now, and I don't want to do the podcast anymore.
Hang on.
Yeah, see you later, guys. Enjoy the rest of this shit show. So, there's evidence of widespread belief in werewolves in medieval Europe. The evidence spans much of the continent as well as the British Isles. Werewolves were mentioned in medieval law codes, such as that of King Knut, whose ecclesiastical ordinances inform us that the codes aim to ensure that the madly audacious werewolf do not too widely devastate nor bite too many of the spiritual flock. That's a pretty interesting quote, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm going to put that on my fucking headstone.
On your headstone, I'm going to put, "Here lies Rob Billington
Foreskin.
with enough blood to power his brain or his penis, but never at the same time."
That is true,
yeah,
actually.
son. Whoop, whoop.
That is true.
I know.
I
That's
got
why it'll be on
found.
your head. So
I got found in the town square with just a big mad heart, making just staring at a wall, like some type of fucking simpleton oaf.
that'll be great, because if that's what kills you, just crossing the road one day and for some reason you just get a stodgy, and then you know, traffic, Rob's just sitting there staring at the wall.
I don't even see like I people show me CCTV footage of me when I get into that state. I don't even know what's going on, but I've seen like 5 lads have to walk me up the main street, and I've like, me Mickey is like ribbon cloth, and they're like trying to push me into
Just
a taxi.
big pale head on you because you're too drained from all the blood it takes to power your massive hog.
My hair turns grey and all. Oh, more Mickey nonsense.
Oh, God.
Here we are again.
Anyway, enough.
get back to the fucking
It never
Middle
ends. The
Ages,
gift
will
that
you?
keeps on giving. I'm trying to get back to the middle. Everyone talking about like passing out in the middle of town because Mickey takes too much blood and he can't move anymore, so he just looks at walls. Your Mickey takes so much blood to get hard that you don't even have enough energy left to be horny, so you're just stuck with a hard Mickey and you can't do nothing with it.
Yeah.
All right. Liutprand of Cremonia reports a rumor that Bajan, son of Simeon the First of Bulgaria, could use magic to turn himself into a wolf.
Oh yeah, so that was like a folkloric tale back then, was that some of these dudes could like turn into a wolf as like a sort of scary type of way to, like, you know, it was like a story. And actually, notably, Game of Thrones featured a lot of sort of humans turning into werewolves. Not so much in the TV show, a little bit. Spoiler alert: Jon Snow fucking goes into the werewolf, but I don't think they actually show that in the show. But in the book, it suggested that he wargs into the werewolf. But like, there's chapters in the book where like the Stark werewolves or wolves are going around the place and stuff like. So Arya is able to go into Nymeria and things like that.
Right.
So it features fairly extensively in Game of Thrones. But yeah, it's that kind of idea. Like, that's why in the show, you might remember Robb Stark had his head cut off with the wolf head was put on his body and stuff. They killed the wolf so that he couldn't get into it, because there was this thing, as long as the wolf lives, the Starks live, or something like that. So they cut the head off the wolf and put it on.
So it's similar to the way Bran was able to get into the eyes of the Raven and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Basically, the Starks are able to warg, and they didn't really do a great job of explaining that in the show. So yeah, but in the books, that's like, it's a thing. So
Okay, so the works of Augustine of Hippo had a large influence on the development of Western Christianity and were widely read by churchmen of the medieval period. And these churchmen occasionally discussed werewolves in their work. Famous examples include Gerald of Wales' Werewolves of Ossory, found in his Topographica Hibernica, and in Gervase of Tilbury's Otia Imperiala, both written for royal audiences. Royal audiences, yeah. Oh, Queen, I love this book about the hairy werewolf. Do you think it's real?
yeah,
Oh, darling, yes. One came into my room the other night and rode me rotten.
me teeth.
You can't be angry. Thief.
Whatever.
Scourge, you fiend.
Whenever I like talking about English, old-timey stuff, I like talking about them having no teeth. I think you misheard me as thief, but I generally just, me teeth. I have no teeth.
Governor.
The werewolves have to take me teeth. What does Gervais? Okay, I'll get on topic here because we're being bold tonight. Gervais reveals to the reader that belief in such transformations, he also mentions women turning into cats and into snakes, that was widespread across Europe. He uses the phrase "que ita donniscunter" when discussing these metamorphoses, which translations to "it is known." So basically, it is known that people were turning into crazy ass animals. Gervais, who was writing in Germany, also tells the reader that the transformation of men into wolves cannot be easily dismissed, for in England we have often seen men change into wolves. Vidimus enim frequenter in Anglia per lunations homines in lupus mutari. I went a bit French there in the middle. But
yeah, you did. It sounded good though.
Oh, thanks, man. So yeah, at the time, like, this was a real thing, and people were saying, like, yeah, people in England are turning into wolves all the fucking time. But further evidence of this widespread belief in werewolves and other human-animal transformations can be seen in theological attacks made against such beliefs. Conrad of Hirsau, writing in the 11th century, forbids the reading of stories in which a person's reason is obscured following such a transformation. Conrad specifically refers to the tales of Ovid in his tract. Pseudo-Augustine, writing in the 12th century, follows Augustine of Hippo's argument that no physical transformation can be made by any but God, stating that the body corporally cannot be changed into the material limbs of any animal. But it's definitely worth exploring why people believed in animal transformations and things back then. Do you have any sort of like explanation as to like why that belief was held?
The only thing I could think is that we probably aren't terribly long into what we might call civilization, right, especially medieval times, you know. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, is it that we still identify a lot with sort of animality, I suppose, and you know, the parts of our DNA that are bound in apes essentially. So is there some sort of like, we have a greater idea of that connection or a greater sense of that connection back then? I guess that's where I would go. And then the other part of it is, if you know, it's not like you're on Facebook's doing whatever back then. So you've got a whole lot of time to maybe see things in the dark that aren't there, that all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's a weird one. I think for me that it's that civilization still, and you could argue it's still not where it needs to be. And I think that's an argument that makes a lot of sense. But I think maybe it's the earlier days of civilization and civility, and we're still in touch with that animal within us, you know?
Yeah, it's a very good way of putting it, actually. And maybe we at the time observed different animals and sort of put there's a word for that where you sort of you're sort of
Anthropomorphize, is it?
you're sort of anthropomorphizing, I suppose, your way with the animal's way, sort of. So like if you're like a wolf, you're more aggressive, you're a hunter. But I don't know, like, I mean, it's kind of weird because like there's no beliefs that you turn into a cow, you know.
Yeah, I think the reason, again, the reason I would say for that is because a cow is pretty docile, right? So it's like, even if you were sort of half cow, I don't know, maybe you can produce milk from your nipples, like, I don't know. But like, I suppose we tend to link it in with animals that are aggressive. And I think that we're trying to subdue our aggressive nature in order to make society work.
Oh,
so
actually,
I think that's, again, that's what I think. Yeah,
that's a solid theory, actually, and I can get behind that one. But I should have said a sheep rather than a cow, because obviously people are referred to as sheep all the time for being passive and going along with the crowd.
Yeah.
And sheep are hunted by wolves. So I wonder, is that some type of link? Yeah, I wonder, is that some type of link that we've discovered right there, that initially, the sheep were hunted by the wolf. So those people were the flock as well, the religious flock. You're part of a flock. A flock. Yes, it's not a fucking flock of wolves, let me tell you that much. So
and it's beware of a sheep in wolves' clothes, or sorry, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and all that sort of stuff. So someone could look like the flock, but they're actually aggressive and dangerous. So yeah, interesting.
So, but at the very least, fucking moth trying to fly in my mouth. At the very least, what we can do is we can definitely say that there was widespread belief in werewolves existing, and widespread belief in people turning into them. So, what you want to choose to believe is up to you. But blah blah blah. Let's get to the wolfing and the killing. And here we are onto the wolf trials, which is what this episode is all about. The first werewolves. And do you want to talk about the case of, is it Gilles Garnier?
I would say Giles, but
it was two L's though.
I don't know.
Giles is one of them.
Gilles. Gilles.
Let's just say
Garnier.
Or just Garnier, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, Laboratoire. Let's just call him Laboratoire Garnier.
Yeah, from 1573. Oh, actually, before we get into it, I should say trigger warning. There's definitely some gruesome and grotesque details in these next few trials. So if you are squeamish, you're triggered by mental shit, don't listen further. It can get fairly bleak in some of the descriptions of what happens. There's some graphic depictions of a lot of things. Without further ado, Eamon, fucking bring on the shit and killing and shit.
Okay, the case of Gilles Garnier, 1573. Gilles Garnier, who was executed on the 18th of January, 1573, was a French hermit and cannibalistic serial murderer convicted of being a werewolf. He was also known as the Hermit of Saint Bonneau and the Werewolf of Dole. Now, I've known a few werewolves in my time.
Yeah, it's a funny name.
That's a story for a different day. Yeah. The Werewolf of Dole, Gilles Garnier, was a reclusive hermit living outside the town of Dole in France, Comté province in France. He had recently been married and moved his new wife out to his isolated home. Being unaccustomed to feeding more than just himself, he found it difficult to provide for his wife, causing discontent between them. During this period, several children went missing and were found dead and the authorities of the Franche-Comté province issued an edict encouraging and allowing the people to apprehend and kill the werewolf responsible. One evening, a group of workers traveling from a neighboring town came upon what they thought in the dim light to be a wolf, but what some recognized as the hermit with the body of a dead child. Soon after, Gilles Garnier was arrested. Now, this is the trigger warning, is it?
Yeah, this is the grim details.
Where this where it gets bad. Do you wanna talk about the grim details?
Yeah, I'll get grim. It's time to get grim. So, according to his testimony at trial, while Garnier was in the forest hunting one night trying to find food for himself and his wife, a spectre appeared to him, offering to ease his troubles, and gave him an ointment that would allow him to change into the form of a wolf, making it easier to hunt. Garnier confessed to having stalked and murdered at least 4 children between the ages of 9 and 12. In October 1572, his first victim was a 10-year-old girl whom he dragged into a vineyard outside of Dole. He strangled her, removed her clothes, and ate the flesh from her thighs and arms. When he had finished, he removed some flesh and took it home to his wife. Weeks later, Garnier savagely attacked another girl, biting and clawing her, but was interrupted by passers-by and fled. The girl succumbed to her injuries a few days later. In November, Garnier killed a 10-year-old boy, again cannibalizing him by eating from his thighs and belly and tearing off a leg to save for later. He strangled another boy, but was interrupted for the second time by a group of passers-by. He had to abandon his prey before he could eat from it. In 1572, he brutally attacked an unknown boy who was passing by and tore him in half by biting and tearing at his belly. In 1573, he strangled a girl, ate her flesh, and tore away her left leg and took it to his wife. So, yeah, all very grim details, but Garnier was...
What the fuck is his wife saying when he gets home?
Yeah, yeah.
She I'm not going to lie to you, Gilles, that is a strange looking turkey, and he's like, oh no, look, it is a turkey. You have not seen, you are unaware, you are a woman, shut up, woman. It's just like, yeah, she must have been in on it, I guess, right?
Yeah, he probably just told her he got it in like the Tesco's, the aisle where the things are gone off the day after, or whatever, the like stuff that's about to be thrown out.
Oh, he probably got like €1 stuff.
Yeah, he was like that's just a bit of lamb hunt that's going off tomorrow. Like, that's why it smells a bit weird. Like, stop fucking moaning with it. And she was like, all right, okay, fair enough, sound. But yeah, so he was found guilty of crimes of lycanthropy and witchcraft and burned at the stake on January 18th, 1574. Even though Garnier was not burned at the stake, his trial was done by the secular authorities and not by the Inquisition, as superstition was not judged by the Inquisition. More than 50 witnesses deposed that he had attacked and killed children in the fields and vineyards, devouring their raw flesh. He was sometimes seen in human shape, sometimes as a loup-garou, aka a werewolf. So he
Garou, Mark of the Wolves.
Oh, so okay. So he's a real, basically, again, at the time, people seeing him as a wolf. He was reported to be seen as a wolf, and he was reported to be seen in human shape. The 2 takeaways that we
does this remind you of anything that we've covered previously? Because there's one that's this really reminds me of that we've recorded recently.
Which one's this?
It
now?
rhymes with Splendigo.
Oh, the Wendigo, yeah.
Similar,
Yeah.
like not exactly the same,
no,
but a similar kind of a thing, right?
I think you're onto it, actually, because he was starving as well, and he was trying to feed his wife. So Wendigo was the famine,
Yeah.
right?
So could it be? Let's say that there's some sort. Let's for hilarity's sake, say that there's some sort of a supernatural thing happening here.
Yes.
Right? Is it that he was taken over by the Wendigo? And as we talked about in some previous episodes, while the Wendigo in one culture might appear as the deer, which obviously the Indians would have hunted, in this culture, the wolf is what hunts the sheep. And as you pointed out, the sheep are associated with the flock are associated with the people, the weak, the ones who follow. So you become the werewolf and attack the flock, I suppose, attack your own. You know, it's interesting because the sort of central driver of it seems to be quite similar, right?
I think you're onto something with the Wendigo sickness and famine driven thought, and you could say that if you want a reasonable explanation, you could say that he had the famine that caused the Wendigo, or at least we hypothesized it caused the Wendigo in our Wendigo episode. If you haven't listened to that, please do go back and listen. Because they actually do tie in quite well now that you put that together. I didn't even think about that. That was a good
so like
conclusion.
it's like werewolf psychosis, right? You know what I mean? Like Wendigo psychosis, werewolf psychosis, and then you devour people. And it's funny as well, you wind up devouring people. Like in this case, he's eating children. Now again, a wolf is a predator. It will go for the easiest prey, so it will go for the lamb rather than the sheep. But the Wendigo cases as well, a lot of those were about guys eating their wives and children. And, do you know what I mean? They weren't eating the hardest man in the village. Like
No. But so that's great, and I'm onto it. But do you want to tell people about Peter Stump? And this is where the Wendigo goes out the window. He was the werewolf of Bedburg.
Okay, so Peter Stump was a man of many aliases, such as Abel Griswold, Eubel Griswold, Peter Stube, etc. He was also a wealthy farmer and a notable figure in his rural community. Okay, so the starvation, I can see how this is going out the window now. It's possible that his name Stump is referring to the fact he was missing his left hand. And apparently the alleged werewolf was also missing its left paw. So that's interesting.
Yeah, so Stump, I don't know if I put this in the notes, but Stump is actually German for like stump, like so they reckon that it was literally like his name was Peter Stump because he had a stump. Like having like a stump arm is like STUMPF or something like that in German. Do you know what I mean? For like if you had a stump for a leg or a stump for an arm. So they reckon that it was literally
they just change his second name. Like
well, like
used to be, you know.
No, but you know, like fucking like Eyeball Paul and all that way, you know, and Davy the Snail.
I get you. So he's just like it's like a joke name.
Yeah.
Like the Walker.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily a joke name, but it's just the name that he has, like Mad Mary, Hellbutt Stan. Do you know? It's just a name. Just a name.
Do we have any other ones? Mad Mary, Dirty Anna was another one.
The Groovy Creep.
Groovy Creep. Finton the Rooster. Yeah, there's a few of them. Hornyhead Jim. That's the second time his lawyers are going to be out first.
I am representing my client, Hornyhead James. Cease and desist on all material involving Hornyhead James. So for people out of the loop here on what we're just...
it'd be so funny if his second name was James and his first name was Hornyhead.
Yeah, so like basically...
It's not Hornyhead Jim, it's Hornyhead James.
Yeah, basically our town has a load of people that have nicknames that are just like so what we're doing is just sounding off some nicknames. We did not give those nicknames to those people, but it's just
well, you gave me a nickname, you bastards. My nickname is Fly, which sounds good because it's like, oh, Fly, he's a cool guy, super Fly, but it's not. It's Fly because Flymo were a lawnmower make, and the lawnmowers were red, and my hair is red, so I am a Flymo lawnmower.
I don't call you Flymo that much though. I call you like Foreskin.
Yeah, you would be much more brutal in your nicknaming conventions. The only nickname I had for you, obviously Rob, but Babby Boy is what you're still in my phone as Babby Boy.
Yeah, and that's a reference from CKY. And like I sent a screenshot that you had taken of something that we were talking about, and my name popped up as Babby Boy with like my picture. And then after I sent the screenshot into a group chat, I was like, that's going to be a really hard one to explain to people. But
yeah, and then Bataro as well.
Yeah, Lord Bataro.
We tend to call each other Bataro.
Yeah, it's like
and then you have Chicken Hut, obviously. That's a different.
He's another cryptid Chicken Hut. He runs.
We'll do an episode on him actually. Do you know that there's a new chicken restaurant just after opening, and it's only a few doors up from him? So
he's delighted then, I'd say.
He'll be putting that condition back on soon enough.
Yeah. Chicken Hut is a Dublin cryptid who roams the streets of Dublin, going into skips looking for old chicken. basically.
Yeah, it's this guy. It's a very strange one. It's almost like the Wendigo, because the Wendigo is like it always needs to eat, but it's eviscerated. Chicken Hut is like Chicken Hut never eats. No one's ever seen Chicken Hut eat except chicken, and we can't understand it. Chicken Hut, he drinks the juice of grapes and eats chicken.
Chicken psychosis.
All right, we got to get off this because people who aren't,
they're like, what's chicken psychosis?
But I would like to do a joke episode on Chicken Hut. To be honest with you, drinking the juice of grapes.
Yeah, we could do it. He's interested. Trust me, if we're talking about Chicken Hut, he's interested. So
we can do some songs from Chicken Hut about.
So how are we getting on with Peter Stump?
So during the Peter Stump, no left hand, werewolf, no left paw, coincidence, you decide.
Right.
Okay, so during the 1580s, he seems to have been a widower with 2 children. A girl called Bele, or Sybil, who seems to have been older than 15 years, and a son of an unknown age.
Right.
Now, in capital letters, very graphic depictions of cannibalism and all sorts of ill shit ahead.
Right,
we will need seatbelts where we're going.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, Rob, you want to again take on the terrible act of telling the listeners about these despicable acts?
Yeah, okay. So, during 1589, Stump had one of the most lurid and famous werewolf trials of history. After being stretched on a rack and before further torture commenced, he confessed to have practiced black magic since he was 12 years old. He claimed that the devil had given him a magical belt or girdle, which enabled him to metamorphose, that word has come up a lot today, into the likeness of a greedy, devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which in the night sparkled like fire, a mouth great and wide, with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body, and mighty paws. Removing the belt, he said, made him transform back into his human form. No such belt was ever found after his arrest, but
shocker.
Yeah, fancy that. But for 25 years, Stump had allegedly been an insatiable bloodsucker who gorged on the flesh of goats, lambs, and sheep, as well as men, women, and children. Being threatened with torture, he confessed to killing and eating 14 children, 2 pregnant women whose fetuses he ripped from their wombs, and ate their hearts panting hot and raw. I did warn you.
Jesus Christ, that is terrible.
Which he later described as dainty morsels. One of the 14 children was his own son, whose brain he was reported to have devoured. Not only was Stump, he's mad. Not only was Stump accused of being a serial murderer and cannibal, but also of having an incestuous relationship with his daughter, who was sentenced to die with him, and that he had coupled with a distant relative, which was also considered to be incestuous according to law. I love how they just executed his daughter just because he wrote her. They were like, you're gone, so I'll see you later.
We're wiping this out at the root. Fuck it.
In addition to this, he confessed to having had intercourse with a succubus sent to him by the devil. So
right.
So interesting, but what goes around comes around, Eamon. Do you want to tell the people about the comeuppance that Stump got?
I will, certainly. Now, just before going into that, I have a quick question.
Yes,
something I've thought about before. Generally you think about like there's rapists and there's murderers and there's different, when you get into that bad, here's the bad bastard crimes, like this lad isn't just smoking a bit of dope.
No.
He's having an incestuous relationship with his daughter. Do you think that when you get like to a place like that where you're willing to rape and murder and cannibalize, that like, do you think everything's on the table? Like it's not like he's just into X, Y, or like, Jesus.
I think it's funny though, like, because there's probably lads that have murdered and eaten people, like, but they probably don't like fucking tomato sauce or something, like, they're like, ugh, I'm not into that. You know what I mean? Like, or a bit of mayonnaise or something, like, mayonnaise.
Do you think it's like mayonnaise and chips, rotten bastards? I know, I'm off to eat me friend. No, do you think that like Do you think that there's this kind of a stuff, like, do you think there's any of these guys, for example, because it's always serial murderers and cannibals and shit like that, and they always seem to be involved in creepy sex stuff as well, like rape, and is it all just about power, do you think, and this is the way it comes out? Or do you think any of them might, for example, be a murderer but not be willing to rape someone, or be a rapist that wouldn't be willing to murder someone, or something like that, you know?
So I think, right, let's get deep on this shit, right? I think personally, without society and without religion, which is ironic again because I've talked about not really being religious, but without without those things, I think man becomes a lot more primal, and I think psychologically, once you've done something like murder someone, like you are now on the outside of society. You are now your own law. You're your own everything. It's the same as when you see like people that smoke a lot of weed or take a lot of drugs are often on the fringes of society, not because of their drug use, but their drug use sort of takes them there, if you get what I'm saying, because they're in their head they're like, I'm not part of what everyone else is part of, and
they're trying to opt out of.
Some people are allure, like that's alluring to them, and then other people not so much. But I think that I think once you've sort of opted out of society and begun just like killing and eating people and murdering people and whatever, I think it's anything goes, really, you know. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's always something I thought about. Like, for example, you know, if you were willing to, like, I think we're all willing to kill people under certain conditions. For example, if someone's gonna kill a member of my family or one of my friends or someone that was important to me, and it was life or death, I could see myself in that situation having to kill someone. I think it would cause me an awful lot of emotional problems and psychological problems afterwards. But I think in the moment, you're trying to protect what's important, you know? Like, I could never imagine myself trying to kill someone, like, without there being a really, really, really important reason to. Do you know what I mean?
I think everyone has their own sort of justice system in their head and what, like, dictates that. You know, I think if I could justify doing it, like if I had a justifiable reason, I think I'd be okay with it. I think I'd be able to come to terms with it. I think I'm pretty good at detaching myself from things like that. Like, not saying I murder people every day.
Like if someone had done something terrible to...
I
get what you mean though. If someone had killed someone important to you on purpose, like...
Then you're like, well, yeah, fuck it. Like, that's what they get, you know? So, I don't know, but I do think that... I think that's what happens to a lot of... and I feel a lot of sympathy towards them as well, as like a lot of the soldiers that come back from war that have, after seeing this like crazy stuff, and they don't feel a part of this society anymore because they've done things that most people in our society have, like they've done things that we haven't done or could even dream of. And they were told, like it was told to them, this is necessary. Like, you have to do this.
Yeah.
This is your job. But for everyone else, we don't have to experience that. So I think it's like a psychological problem for them, you know?
Well, it must be a very, like, I suppose if you think about it, like, we're in our society now, you know? So we're just, you get up, you go to work, you do whatever you do, you eat your food at the restaurant. Well, not now because no restaurants are open. No. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just, society is what it is. But it's what must be really strange is to go to a different country or even the same country, and the rules are now, no, we kill these people. That's what we do, or we torture them, or we try to get information from them. And then when that's over and you're being told you're doing a really good job, like basically protecting your country and murdering guys, and then you come home and it's like, all right, that's over now. Like, now you're just...
Well, you're led to believe you're protecting
doing what
your
we
country, but that's a whole different story altogether.
Yes, that's true as well.
That's also a problematic thought process for a lot of those people when they come home. They're like, was I protecting something?
Yeah, what was I doing? Did I enjoy the part of, not the killing itself, but I'd say there's some adrenaline from being in a gunfight. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that I've ever been or would ever want to be, but I imagine if that's something that a situation you're in day after day, it must be very hard to find that same adrenaline dump or that adrenaline high from anything else in your that your society can offer you, you know?
Yeah, it's a different thing.
It's not a good thing. Yeah.
No, it's a different way of life. Like, so I mean, I do feel a lot of empathy towards those people that do struggle with that once they get home, because I mean, it's only natural,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, on the same hand, and this mightn't be a very popular thing to say, but it is something I believe. I think that people who do heinous things in life, you know, whether it's murder or whatever, like, I do think that if you look into their histories, they've probably had a terrible run of life. They've had a terrible cast of the dice, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
I think that
100%.
most people are doing their best. Yeah, like, I do think most people are doing their best, even though they could be doing heinous things. If you look into everything, they probably just never had the tools.
There's always an explanation
to do any better.
Yeah, there's always an explanation for like why anyone does anything, and the main question really is like, how much, like, what does the explanation do for you? There's probably, right, so we're talking about Stump here, there's probably an explanation as to why he did what he did, but does explaining it do anything for you? Is it satisfying in any way? Do you know, like, is there any reason to even bother, you know?
Yeah, that's a fair point as well. Like, I do wonder. Sometimes I think I get way lost thinking about this sort of stuff, and I would get into the point where I'm like, well, is it all just fate? And whether it's good or bad, it's just fateless, and like, you don't really have any control, and you don't really have any free will.
Okay, well, yeah, like,
stuck in this, and that's a bigger thing, I guess.
So if you're a child and every day you're bet by your parents and like treated absolutely disgracefully in ways that we can't imagine, like they're putting out cigarettes on you, they're spitting on you, they're taunting you, and you grow up to be a serial killer, it is not your fault. So then you have to figure out, what do I do with this person? Like, this is a person that has been essentially turned into a monster by two other people. But what can you do? I mean, it's a weird thing. I mean, I suppose the most humane thing to do is lock them up or whatever for life.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, this is it, yeah. Do people even want life if they're like that? And then again, like, how some of these people as well, you can never let them back into society. Like, nothing you can do will change some of them. You know, some of these dudes that are just like,
oh no, of course
serial
not.
killing.
Yeah, no.
So, like, you know, and again, look, I know that the whole problem with the death penalty is that you can't always be sure that it's correct, so you run the risk of killing someone that really doesn't deserve to die. But yeah, it's just, it's an interesting thing. Anyway, we should probably get off that, because that could be a whole different episode.
Literally, let's tell everyone about Stump and Stump getting
the execution of Stump. So, on October 31st, Halloween night, in 1589, Stump and his daughter are executed, and his mistress. It's one of the most brutal on record. Stump is put to a wheel where flesh was torn from his body in 10 places with red-hot pincers, followed by his arms and legs. Then his limbs were broken with the blunt side of an axe head to prevent him from returning to the grave. I'm just returning from the grave. I'm just laughing at that. You just see Stump, he's like, if only they hadn't broken my elbows, I could get out of this. Before he was beheaded and his body was burned on a pyre. Yeah. His daughter and mistress had already been flayed and strangled and were burned along with Stump's body. As a warning against similar behavior, local authorities erected a pole with the torture wheel and the figure of a wolf on it. And at the very top, they placed Peter Stump's severed head.
He got his.
He certainly did.
It's interesting though that even in his death, they absolutely believed that he was like some type of shapeshifter, and more than meets the eye, he was a heavily mystical character in his town or whatever. They took every measure to make sure that he could not come back to life. So at the very least, there seems to have been some mass hysteria about him. But there's a few things to consider about the trial before we talk too much about it, and a little bit about werewolves in general, I suppose, is that Stump at the time was a wealthy Protestant, and it was right in the middle of a Catholic Protestant holy war.
Was that the 100 Years' War, the French one?
30 Years War was it, I think. Was
Or
that
the
part
30
of it?
Years' War,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Huguenots. And
Yeah.
I remember.
So when the Protestants were defeated during 1587, Bedburg Castle, he was from Bedburg, became the headquarters of Catholic mercenaries commanded by the new Lord of Bedburg, Werner, Count of Salm Reiferscheid Dick, who was a staunch Catholic determined to re-establish the Roman faith. So it's not inconceivable that the werewolf trial was but barely a concealed political trial, with the help of which the new Lord of Bedburg planned to bully the Protestants of the territory back into Catholicism. If it had been just another execution of an alleged werewolf and a couple of witches, as occurred about this time in various parts of Germany, the attendance of members of the aristocracy, perhaps including the new Archbishop and Elector of Cologne, would be surprising. Furthermore, the trial remained a singular event. However, this does not mean that the charges were without basis. In fact, the execution of a mere Protestant convert would have been deeply unlikely to have drawn the aristocratic attention Stump's trial did. And while it was unlikely for the elite to attend any given werewolf or witch trial, the sheer scale of Stump's alleged crimes would have made it more visible to the public at large and the nobility. It seems like there is more to the Peter Stump story, don't you think?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a little bit of conspiracy going on there.
There could have been a bit of the old wily Catholics mixing it up there a little bit.
The old Catholics.
It seems like, to be honest, like there's a few things I'm thinking here. So one is either he did it, and face value, he was a werewolf, and seemingly he admitted to it, and all this. Two is that it was all sort of staged as a way to frighten Protestant landowners, and it was basically a case of what's his name, this dude, the Count Werner. He could have staged this as a way to frighten the rest of the Protestant landowners into like submitting to him. Kind of like in, again, another Game of Thrones reference, like how after they killed Robb Stark or Ned Stark, they decry him and denounce him and slander his name and say that he did this and he did that and he didn't do any of it. It's possible that Stube was basically, or Stump was held captive and maybe coerced into saying that he did these various ill acts, as some sort of way of
possible.
Maybe they said, like, if you admit this, we'll save your daughter or your son.
Yeah. He'd eaten the son at that point, I think, though.
But
I'm joking.
Yeah, you're right, John. But history is told in the eyes of the victor, right? So the Catholics came out on top. I don't know about the whole war. I don't know how that went, but at least in this instance, the Catholics came on top. So I wonder, did they?
Well, no, yeah, definitely. In the 30 Years' War, I remember studying this in history years ago, which is why I thought it was the 100 Years' War.
Right.
But it was, at the end of it, because France is such a Catholic country.
Right.
So the Protestants were called the Huguenots back then, if memory serves me correctly. But yeah, by and large, the Catholics came out on top there. What is interesting about that one is there's a movie on Netflix called When They See Us.
Right.
Or not a movie, sorry, a 4-part series. And it's set in the 80s in New York. And I think it's New York anyway. I might be getting that part wrong, so apologies if I am. There's a park near this kind of I think it's a place in Harlem or somewhere like that, where these like 5 black kids live. And basically one night, everyone's just running around the park. They're not really rioting or causing big problems. They're just these kids that are in like early teenagers that are running around the park. And they're basically, at the same night, there's a rape in the park. And a woman is
I know this
left
case.
for dead.
Yeah.
Did you watch the?
No, I haven't watched
the
it.
Show
But I'm familiar with the. It's a true story, like, isn't it?
It's a true story.
Yeah,
It's like, to watch it is heartbreaking,
Yeah,
man. Like
yeah. I'm familiar
Jesus
with
Christ, you feel so bad for these people.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting way in that if you look at and again, look, it's a movie. I'm sure it's sort of, yeah, they've made it a bit more
Dramatic.
a bit more dramatic than it would have been. Yeah. But when you see the reason and how they try to tie the place together, is they're just looking to tie up the case, and they're not really caring about justice. They're not really caring about the justice for these 5 boys. And it's a disgusting thing to watch, like, and you feel so angry about this massive injustice done to them. But it almost like syncs up with this to a certain extent, where you use something that's happened to shine a light almost on something else.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Or you use, because it becomes a very like white, I suppose a racism thing in America. And all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's interesting, because the powers that be, as you've said yourself, the victors of history write, they write what the future generations learn. So is this something that was done by the Catholics or the Huguenots to kind of put some fear on the necks of the Protestants? I mean, that's interesting. I'll tell you one thing, man. I wouldn't be fucking around if I saw what happened to that guy. I'd be like, yeah, no, whatever the Catholics want, that's grand. Not gonna speak up.
Especially, like, obviously, look, this is, we don't know whether he did or didn't do it. Like, at this time, there was a lot of mad shit, but this is just a theory that, let's just say he didn't do it. Like, that, if you knew that guy, right, let's just say that guy was the salt of the earth and he was a really nice dude, and next thing he's getting tried for being a fucking child eater and a black magic dude with a magic fucking girdle, and he's getting hung, drawn and quartered and bed up with axes and everything, you'd be like, okay, I'm not talking about anything anymore. Like, I know this dude, but now obviously we're jumping into the land of presume, and for all intents and purposes, this probably, I mean, this is an account of something that happened, so I mean,
yes, like
that's the anything other than us just sort of like, we're sort of hypothesizing about it. But if he did do it, man, that's some fucked up shit, like, isn't it?
That's some really, really messed up stuff. Yeah, it's awful.
Like, do you reckon he believed in black magic? Because I do know, like, interestingly enough, my dad like dabbled in a bit of that stuff, so I get all that weird type of stuff. But I remember reading one of his like books about that, like a handwritten like notes that he had done, and a lot of that does believe, I don't know if it's black, I don't fucking know, but it's some type of fucking magic in here. But a lot of the belief in that is that it does, you empower objects, like you put like the spells onto objects, like that's what a lot of that is. So this magical belt kind of thing definitely does sound like something that someone who did that would say, because I read about things like fucking elementally charging swords and things like that. So
all right,
yeah, so I mean, it's a case of he could have believed it if he was a fucking lunatic,
Yeah. Well, do you think there is any kind of psychiatric kind of a thing going on with him now, that the guy who thought he was a werewolf? You don't think he was a bit mental?
Yeah, well, it segues nicely onto clinical lycanthropy, which you sent me up lovely there, Eamon, for the pitch. I'll do the home run. But so yeah, clinical lycanthropy. So obviously lichens, you guys are familiar with that now. That's where the name comes from. Clinical lycanthropy is defined as a rare psychiatric syndrome that involves a delusion that the affected person can transform into, has transformed into, or is an animal. As the Eamon transforms into a foreskin.
That's not an animal, Rob.
Imagine how useless that power would be.
Well, actually, apparently for stem cells, it's quite good.
Yeah.
So yeah, apparently they're using the circumcised penises of babies at the moment to like do stuff with women's faces, like to make them look younger or something.
Yeah, so like, we're talking about fucking Peter Stube, but the reality is way worse. Like, if you went back to the 1500s and told the village they're cutting off foreskins and putting it on faces, then I'll be like horrified and they'd burn the person and that's our norm. So
here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Old Jimmy Foreskin face. Frankie Foreskin. Its name is associated with the mythical condition of lycanthropy, a supernatural affliction in which humans are said to physically shapeshift into wolves. It is purported to be a rare disorder. A study on lycanthropy from the McLean Hospital reported on a series of cases and proposed some diagnostic criteria by which lycanthropy could be recognized. A patient reports in a moment of lucidity or reminiscence that they sometimes feel as an animal or have felt like one. A patient behaves in a manner which resembles animal behavior, for example, howling, growling, or crawling. According to these criteria, either a delusional belief in current or past transformation or behavior that suggests a person thinks of themselves as transformed is considered evidence of clinical lycanthropy. The authors note that, although the condition seems to be an expression of psychosis, there is no specific diagnosis of mental or neurological illness associated with its behavioral consequences. It also seems that lycanthropy is not specific to an experience of human to wolf transformation. A wide variety of creatures have been reported as part of the shape-shifting experience. A review of the medical literature from early 2004 lists over 30 published cases of lycanthropy, only the minority of which have wolf or dog themes. Canines are certainly not uncommon, although the experience of being transformed into a hyena, cat, horse, bird, or tiger has been reported on more than one occasion. Transformation into frogs and even bees has been reported in some instances. Do you ever turn into a bee, Eamon?
I've never turned into a bee, but I did turn into a cat once, and I just sat on the counter licking my balls for the majority of the day. It was a good day. It was a nice day.
Sounds like a great day, actually. One thing I forgot to mention before, you see, because sometimes when I do these notes, I'm like, did I write that later on in the fucking episode? And like, I get all confused. But an interesting thing about werewolves, and something that I want to mention, is in different cultures, people transform into different animals. So in the African culture, they transform into hyenas. And then in the Native American culture, it might be wolves there as well. But there is, in different areas, it's basically a different pack animal. So like we were saying before,
right.
It seems like it seems to be embodying like the hunter carnivore type of animal, you know?
Yeah. And I suppose, whatever is like a hyena obviously would be more common in Africa than a wolf. I don't think there are wolves in Africa,
Not
are there?
really, like probably not.
Yeah, there's more in North America. So it sort of makes sense that it's a predatory animal that you cast the same thing against. I guess in Ireland, I mean, we don't really have any predatory animals. Maybe a dog, not a predatory animal, but in terms of the most dangerous animal.
We did have wolves, but they were driven to extinction by us, Homo sapiens, as usual. They were actually, I think we mentioned on one episode they were talking about reintroducing them here, which is just the worst idea ever.
Into Wicklow, not a great idea.
No. So, I mean, really, the werewolf episode is quite interesting. And like I said, we just scratched the surface, really, on werewolves. And they'll probably definitely be revisited again. What's your take of it all? Like, do you think... It's sort of hard one to really settle on, isn't it? There's a lot of weirdness to it.
It's interesting. It's funny how across cultures, like, again, talking about the Wendigo episode and Swift Runner and eating his family and all that sort of stuff. We're talking about Stump and him eating his family. The sighting of the Wendigos, like the actual deer creature, but also the person possessed by it, and then the Wendigo psychosis, and although the lycanthropy psychosis here, I don't know. They seem like they're different versions of the same thing almost.
Yeah, like it's like they're all related and intertwined.
So is it something in the human sort of in the human psyche that's more so than an actual thing? Do you know what I mean? And it's just the culture manifests it differently.
It's weird. It's like all those group things like this I find really interesting because it's, there's if different, like, again, we're talking about times when different cultures were not really intermingling, and they all had similar traits. So that stuff is fascinating because
Absolutely,
yeah, it's like there's definitely I don't know. It's interesting, and there's probably more to it, and I'm sure in further episodes we'll definitely cover more bits that'll crop up with similarities. But yeah, do you have anything to add before we finish this one up?
No, I think that about captures it all. It's an interesting one, but I definitely like to go and dig into some of the other werewolf cases and stuff a bit more as we go on. You know, it's a deep well.
Yeah, and the witch trials and all are another whole different thing that we can go into, and Salem and all that stuff is all very interesting as well. So, thanks for listening, guys. If you have any questions or queries, do message us at Monster Fuzz Podcast. And I've been Rob.
And I'm Eamon.
And we'll see you again soon.
Ow.